Perhaps the central policy issue in this weekend's New South Wales state election is the government's plans to privatise electricity infrastructure, the so-called poles and wires. Sam Dastyari is a Labor senator for New South Wales. Senator, welcome.
Great to be here.
Now, what do you believe ASIO's concerns are about privatising New South Wales electricity infrastructure?
Well, let's be clear what's going on here. And I think the people of New South Wales, the government hasn't quite been honest with the people of New South Wales about what are going to be some pretty serious security considerations that have to be factored in. Now, for a Chinese state-owned company, the state-owned grid, to purchase our assets, and they at the moment look like they're the front-runner buyer. You know, we now know the Premier himself went over, visited them when he was in China. It was a secret meeting. The meeting was never recorded. We know that the Treasurer has been going there and meeting with them. And the fact is, we're kidding ourselves if we think there is not going to be some kind of security consideration before this sale is allowed to happen. Now, what I'm saying is the government needs to come clean, and the federal government should be calling on the security agencies to put out on the table what their concerns are going to be before polling day, so that we're not given a shock and a surprise a couple months down the road.
But the Foreign Investment Review Board has the powers to block foreign investment on security grounds. They've already done it with the NBN and QA. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? That the government can simply say to any Chinese investor, no, you can't buy these assets.
And the people of New South Wales need to be aware of that. I mean, there's this notion out there the government's been kind of pushing, that this is a decision that's solely going to be made on price, that there's all these international buyers out there, that the price is being driven up as a result of international competition. And what they're failing to say is exactly what you just said there, and that is, you know, we've seen this before in the NBN process. We've seen it before. In fact, you know, there's been stories around for a long time that when the Singaporean government...
You're not suggesting that there's no other buyers, it's only Chinese state-owned enterprises
I'm
that would be
saying that
interested.
the front runner at the moment to purchase these assets, I mean, the only place the Treasurer has travelled to, the only people the Treasurer has met with internationally to do this purchase, you know, they only went to China to meet with the state-owned grid. The Premier himself has been going over there. These are secret meetings that haven't been recorded in the diaries. What I'm saying is there is, and let's not kid ourselves, there is going to be other considerations as part of this. You're completely right. The FIRB process looks at national security, looks at recommendations to people like ASIO. What I'm saying is, rather than have this happen down the road after the election, it would be preferable if we had the discussion before, so the people of New South Wales are fully aware of exactly what you just said earlier.
But, I mean, if there's not a fully transparent tender process, I mean, the government would get crucified, wouldn't it?
Look, I'm not saying the government's not going to go through a tender process. And the government itself came out and said, yes, FIRB will look at national security considerations. My concern is all of this is going to happen after a decision's being made, after an election this Saturday. And what I'm urging is I think there is an opportunity between now and polling day for the security agencies and the government, it has to be done through the government, to have a frank discussion about, you know, what is and isn't going to happen. Look, my concern is people aren't actually being told how these things really work. And how it really works is that agencies like ASIO highlight some really big concerns. And I just want to give you an example. We've been through this before.
Do you believe, under any circumstances, that the federal government and the Foreign Investment Review Board would allow a state-owned Chinese enterprise to buy the New South Wales electricity grid?
Well,
it's unimaginable.
Well, look, I mean, if that's the case, if it's unimaginable and it's never going to happen, then you have to ask questions about why the Premier would be flying over to China to be meeting with state-owned corporations. You know, you'd have to be asking questions about why these meetings are taking place. Obviously, there's people who believe it can happen.
The Premier's trips to China were solely to talk about
well, he himself in a press release said promoting the assets was part of his trip. I think it was a purpose of his trip. And premiers of New South Wales should go to China. Prime Minister should go to China. You know, I try and get there as often as I can. I think it's an incredible place and it's an incredible growth opportunity for Australia. But the point you're making is the right point, and that is that, you know, there is going to be some serious security considerations here. And yes, ASIO are going to have a say. And the example I want to give you is, you know, we've been through this before in the South Australian example. In the South Australian example, where the Singaporean government wanted to purchase, I think it was in the vicinity of 20% through their state-owned corporations. You know, the security agencies addressed a whole lot of concerns that affected the price, that affected the purchase, and that was for a smaller stake. You mentioned the NBN negotiations and the fact that, you know, the Foreign Investment Review Board and also ASIO and the security agencies, all of this was reasonably transparent, as much as these things ever are transparent at the time, raised concerns. What I'm saying is we're going to get to a process in a couple of months where we're being in that same space again. And I think it's incumbent upon us and incumbent on the government to make it clear to the people of New South Wales that this will be a consideration. This is going to be part of the process. And don't be fooled into this idea that, oh, everyone's competing and it's all going to be done on price. It's not all going to be done on price.
So just finally, as New South Wales voters cast their ballots on Saturdays, if they've got a concern about this privatisation plan, what should be at the forefront of their mind? Commercial returns to the state governments, issues of who owns it, or this idea of there's some sort of security threat?
Well, I think all of it. I think all of it. Frankly, I think if you have concerns and you're unsure, you shouldn't be voting for it. I think this is a bad proposal. I think it's bad for the state. Now, of course, I would say that. That's the position of my party. That's the position we've held for a long period of time. But I think there is still far, far too many unanswered questions. And frankly, you know, this is going to be the story of the week. For the next couple of days, this is going to be raised again and again, why these meetings happen, why diary entries have changed, and the Premier needs to come clean between now and Saturday.
So how long have you known of this? Have you just waited till a couple of days before the election to bring it up in the Senate under parliamentary privilege?
No, frankly, I mean, a whole bunch of this was revealed by the Sydney Morning Herald yesterday morning. I mean, a lot of this started coming out yesterday morning in an exclusive front page story that the Sydney Morning Herald, that obviously one of your publications ran, is where a lot of this actually began to come from and started with, and it was broken by the paper. And so we're kind of following up on the back of that, and you start looking at this and start realising, hang on, there are more and more considerations here.
Okay, Senator,
thank you so much. Thank you.